Hey there, everyone. Welcome back. Tonight we have an event called Florida's Ghostly Curses. It's with our fantastic host, Christopher Balzano, who, if you've been here for the past 3 Thursdays, has been teaching us all about the ghost stories throughout the state of Florida, and some really fantastic stuff that goes along with it. If you haven't seen those yet, you can check them out on our YouTube and Facebook channels. You can go back, watch them over again if you've seen them once. We've got a lot of great stuff, built up in that library. But tonight we're going to be having Florida's Ghostly Curses, which is I'm personally very, very excited about. Got to go over a few things before we get started. This is a part of our NEA Big Read series. We've got a lot of great events, well, a few more events actually. It's almost over. We only have 3 more days for this series. But if you go on to our ocls.info/bigread, you can check out the remaining events that we have. Also, if you go to ocls.info/bigreadquiz, we have a Kahoot quiz. All you got to do is complete it. Doesn't matter if you get any of the answers right. As long as you finish the quiz and have an Orange County Library card, you can get entered to win a ton of different gift cards absolutely for free. So definitely check that out if you have an Orange County Library card. I will post a link for that in just a second. But yeah, thank you so much. You can also, on that link, request a craft pack. That craft pack gives you a free copy of the book Pretty Monsters by Kelly Link, and also a bunch of different crafts to go along with that book. So it's a pretty cool thing. Like I said, all this stuff is absolutely free. But without any further ado, I'd like to get started. Let me bring on Christopher Balzano. He is a folklorist, a podcaster, a teacher, just a great storyteller. And yeah, we're happy to bring him back for the final event of the Big Read series. Christopher, welcome on.
Thank you very much. I think we have to add mailman into that.
Oh, yes.
in addition to doing some of the deliveries, the Orange County Library patrons have been really good in terms of hitting me up and requesting copies of the book. And then a lot of them getting into little conversations about it as well. So I really appreciate your patrons and the people who have been getting in touch with me and supporting my work. And trust me, your books are on the way. I was able to get them all out on Monday. So if anyone else is wanting one, you can hit me up on my social media. But for those of you guys who did and who are in here tonight, thank you very much for the support. And your haunted love is on the way, I guess.
Yeah, so. And one more time, that is on Facebook. That's Tripping on Legends, correct? You just searching Tripping on Legends.
Facebook.com/Tripping on Legends or Facebook.com/ Haunted Florida Love Stories.
Awesome. And yeah, if you message Christopher on that, he's going to send you a copy of the book. That offer still in place?
Sure, signed copy of the book for $17, as opposed to the 22 that it is. It's officially released in 4 days, so the allure of getting it ahead of time, it might be off a little bit, but you can still get a reduced price on it and get a signature. And of course, if you want a personal message, I can put it on there too. I can even say thank you. This wouldn't have been I wouldn't have been able to do this without you. You're my inspiration, whatever kind of message you might want.
Each and every one of you. Awesome. I'm going to leave you to it. So make sure you check out his Tripping on Legends. We'll throw that link up in the comments during the presentation. But yeah, Christopher, if you want to get started,
excellent.
Yeah, we're good to go.
Beautiful. Hold on one second here. I'm having a little bit of issue. Here we go. Beautiful. Thank you very much, guys, for coming out and checking this out. Can you see the presentation? Is it showing it?
You have to bring up the PowerPoint first. I don't see it quite yet. I still have the folder link up.
Hold on 1 second here.
Yeah, no worries. I'll bring that up as soon as it is up there. But let me hang on here just a sec.
I'll do it this way because it's not working the other way, and I will. Wow! See, we were so excited talking about days. We didn't set it up ahead of time, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Time to be together. All right.
Cool.
See
I'll throw it up now and get me out of here for you. All right. It's up there. Oh yeah, and you can just click on stop. Hide. Yeah.
Beautiful. So welcome, guys. When we did this series and we talked about what we wanted to do and what we wanted to have for you guys, I really established this idea of there are three main excuses. There are three main reasons why people believe something to be haunted, or in terms of what I do, the folklore behind why a place might be haunted. The first one, which we discussed, is because some kind of crime or some kind of death happened in that location, and it's so ridiculously famous or so sensational that anything that happens in that area, people naturally assume it has to be connected to that. And that was haunted, our Florida's haunted murders. And then, of course, love. Love was a main reason why people stay earthbound. It's a main reason why people can believe a story, because there's a love story they know attached to it. And that was the second one we did. And of course, that was the inspiration for my new book, Haunted Florida Love Stories. But then there's another reason, which I'm somewhat fascinated with. And this was actually a book that I proposed that didn't get accepted. And that's Florida's Haunted Curses. And this idea that when things go bad, people need something to blame. And when paranormal happens, people need something to blame. And the interesting part about most of the stories I'm going to present to you guys tonight is they're really the story of the outsider, right? They're the stories of a town that is failing and people just can't understand why. Maybe it's the neighboring town which is successful. Maybe it's they were primed to boom and maybe even oftentimes had a boom and life just falls apart. Whatever it is, they need to attack something. They need to make sense of it. And oftentimes after they've done that, there's this sense of guilt. There's this sense of we've done something wrong. And now when bad things happen, it's because you've taken some active part in trying to get rid of it. Let me explain who I am a little bit. I'm assuming that many of you have been on these presentations, so I won't harp on a lot of this too much, except to say that I spent many years as a paranormal investigator. I spent years before that as a storyteller collecting stories of the paranormal. And eventually, I kind of got sick of doing the whole investigator thing, and I wanted a more raw experience. And so I embraced this idea of what's known as legend tripping. And through legend tripping, I became more of a folklorist. It's funny because people were calling me a folklorist long before I ever kind of embraced that title. The idea of legend tripping is that you hear a story from a certain town, and you ahead of time do a whole bunch of research into who's telling the story and potentially why they're telling the story, what are the details of the story, and a lot of times, what are the variables of the story? So how does the story change? How is it like other ones you've heard? And then we go out and we try to experience the legend, experience the haunting, the same way that people talk about it. And oftentimes that involves doing some kind of trigger, or it involves saying some chant, which is part of the legend, or bringing an object that has a role in what's going on in the story, and then just experiencing it, not trying to document it, not trying to, or documenting it, yes, but not trying to capture evidence or prove whether it's real or not. All the stories that you're going to hear tonight could 100% be true, or they could 100% be false. As a folklorist, I don't care. As a storyteller, all that matters is that they connect to you. And I hope that these ones do, because they're kind of, each one of them has touched me in different ways in a very personal and sometimes spiritual way because of the very nature of them. You know, my friend Jeff, and I'm sure he didn't invent the phrase, but he says it all the time because he covers a lot of these ghostly things in New England. Always says a curse is real because you believe it, right? Therefore, if you think that you're cursed, 2020 is a great example. We think 2020 is a cursed year, and therefore everything that bad that happens, we just kind of nod our head and say, makes sense, it's 2020, and it becomes almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. The first story I'm going to talk to you about tonight is the most recent story that I've collected that falls under this category, and as a matter of fact, it's probably one of the most recent stories I documented. I put a call out to anyone who had any kind of stories having to do with the Ocala National Forest, which is the book I'm doing right now. And this was one of the very first responses that I got. And I became obsessed with this story and obsessed with this idea because there were a few things that didn't quite add up. So a lot of these stories of curses, hauntings in general, are engaging not only because they're spooky or they freak you out a little bit or they maybe say something about life after death, but also because there's parts of them that just don't sit right. And for him, it was a story that was told on the trail. So oftentimes in the Ocala National Forest, this guy Jeremy would walk with his father, walk with his grandfather, spend time on these trails on his ATV and his four-wheeler, riding up and down these trails. And he would hear this story from what he called the old timers. And it was interesting. He phrased much of this story when he told it to me as if it were being told from a much older generation down to a younger. This story, if you believe the location, which is somewhat in dispute, takes place in Paisley, Florida. So right on the edge of the Ocala National Forest. Although once you're in it, you're in the forest. So it makes complete sense. And the story is unique in some elements and not in others. When he got in touch with me, he said, there is a story in the old town of Rosewood. And he was very clear to say it was not the Rosewood in Levy County. It was not the infamous Rosewood, which maybe you guys know about, maybe you don't. We'll talk about it a little bit. He said it was another one that was called Rosewood. It rose and it fell, and then it burned to the ground. Now, if you know anything about the Ocala National Forest and the towns that surround it, this is a very common story. This idea of these towns boom, and then all of a sudden something goes wrong, and then there's a fire, and most of what used to be the town is gone. And unlike other places, because the swamp and because the forest is so quick to take what used to be his or its, the town's never developed again. And so you have all of these places in central Florida that are ghost towns where nature has retaken it. This story is unique in that it involves a coyote. So this woman, young lady, teenager, I believe in the story she's 14, falls madly in love with a 17-year-old boy. And her father objects to it completely. And he objects to it not because he's 17 and she's 14, but because he is African American. And he refuses to allow his daughter to date an African American man. And the mother is somewhat supportive of this, but she's definitely supportive of her daughter. So when the father decides that he's going to disown her, he's going to throw her out of the house, the mother kind of stands up for her and says, no, like, we'll figure something out. And so the father just kind of stews with this idea until one day he's walking in downtown Rosewood, if you can call it that, and he comes across this gentleman, and the emotions and the anger just overtake him, and he beats him almost to an inch of his life. He beats him right there in the town hall, and town square, and everyone is kind of watching it. No one's helping him. He then drags him off into the woods, and no one knows what happens to the man after that. Some people say he left for South Florida. Some people say that he was actually killed, that the father killed him and left his body in the woods. Either way, the story gets back to the woman, and the girl, and she goes to the town hall, and she can actually see in the square like the blood of the man she loved. And she runs through the woods trying to find him, and she can follow the blood trail, but she can't find him. And she's so overwhelmed with what her father has done that she goes home. She takes the gun that keeps in his dresser, and when he arrives home at night, she kills him. Now, once she's seen what she has done, her father's dead body is there. The man she loves is gone and can't be found. She knows she's going to have to face her mother. It's overwhelming to her, and she runs into the woods, into a cemetery where her and the boy used to meet. And she's weeping and she's crying and she's screaming and all of a sudden, the voice or the scream that she has is no longer her own. Instead, it becomes that of a coyote. And she decides almost instantly, once that voice changes, that there's only one thing to do. She lies down on one of the graves and commits suicide with the gun herself. Problem is, they never find the body, because it's said that at the moment that she dies, she actually gets transformed into a coyote herself. And now she strolls that area, and if people who are of bad intent are in the woods, she will take them and she will steal them away. She will kill them, and no one will ever find their body. And this is the reason why so many people who are kind of sinister never make it out of the Ocala alive. But the other thing is that people who are camping will hear the howls of a coyote. And underneath these howls of the coyote, which people have gotten very used to now, is the crying or the screaming of a young woman. So she is now cursed to stay in that forest until she can kind of make up for what she's done. But then other people, because I found other people tell this story too, other people say that the town is cursed because almost immediately the town went under and it burnt down. And to be honest with you, you can't find anybody who knows of this town, right? The story can't be that old. The story has to exist in some kind of reality, but there is no one that remembers a Rosewood, Florida near Paisley. There is no one who remembers a town burning down like that. And if they can, they already know the name of it. So I became obsessed with, well, what town is this? And it could be Rosebush, or it could be another town which has wood at the end of it. And why is this story like this? And what I think happened, because there are many things in Central Florida, all around the edge of the Ocala, that have Rosewood attached to it, that name, is that over the years it became attached to the story of Rosewood, which is kind of one of the worst instances of racial tension in the state of Florida. And it essentially was very much like the book To Kill a Mockingbird, in that someone was accused of assaulting a woman, tensions flared, and eventually there was what's known as the Rosewood Massacre, where over 100 African Americans, some of them children, were killed by the locals. And a movie was made about it about 15, 20 years ago now. And so, it's somewhat fresh in people's minds, and I can't help thinking that that has something to do with the name. But where is the cemetery, right? I talked to this guy. I tried to break down where it might be. If you've ever been in the Ocala, there are a ton of abandoned cemeteries because so many of these towns exist. They would rise, they would fall, and family plots would be abandoned. The best example, or the best potential cemetery I could find, was this one. And this one is literally on a bike trail. I can confirm that this cemetery is full of ticks because I came home with several of them myself. And it was a small family cemetery. It's on this path, which is called Old Cemetery Road. And he told me, if you reach Lake Door, you've gone too far. And this is the last one we were able to find there. And you can see that it now has a fence all around it, and it was for a while taken care of, but the trees have absolutely destroyed it. We were there. We didn't run into any coyotes. As a matter of fact, because of the details of the story, there's a lot that doesn't make sense. And one of those ideas is there is no way that it could have been a coyote. There's no way that she could have been hearing coyotes, because coyotes have only been in Florida for about 50 years. Most likely, from what I've been told by people, what he's actually hearing is a panther. And a Florida panther sounds a lot like the howl of a coyote with a little bit of a woman's scream. But I'm not going to stay in the Ocala overnight to try to experience this one myself. A very detached story, right? The guy didn't know her. The reports, I mean, he heard the screaming himself and that howling himself, but it's nothing like the curse children of Coker Cemetery in Arcadia. If you were here for our first presentation where we talked about crime and we talked about the tale of the Richardsons and the man who was wrongly accused of killing his children, there are many details of that share a family, if you will, with this Coker family cemetery, which is only about 5 miles away from it. It's hilarious because when I first wanted to find this, I went out to Arcadia and I searched and I searched and I searched for this cemetery and I could not find it. It until about 5 years ago had been completely abandoned. It only existed in people's minds and memories. And if you can see it, all this high grass above it, all of this is just right behind it are orange groves, right? So this land used to be farmed by the Coker family, and it was kind of overtaken, but they can't develop on this. So it's literally in the middle of an orange grove. And the best part is I was only about 100 feet away from this cemetery and couldn't see it because the grass that surrounds it is so high and so thick. Until about 5 years ago, this was completely overgrown. But there's a story that's attached to it. And the story that attached to it is the story of the lots. You know, I talked about the outsider, right? I talked about the idea that when things go wrong or when things are mysterious, people need somebody to blame. In this case, people have been reporting weird lights and giggles and these dark shadows that exist in this cemetery, right? People have gone there and actually been pushed or felt like something was watching them. Very intense things, and they can't explain why. But one thing that they notice is that there are 3 plots for these children with the last name Lot, and there's no explanation for why they're there. There are no other family members. They're all children. 2 of them were died before they were 1 year old, and one made it to, I think, 18 months. And then no one else. There's no other family attached to them. And they're in the middle of the Coker family cemetery, and there's no reason for it. There's no explanation. And so a legend developed of a curse. Now, the story goes that the Lotts were a somewhat successful farming family, and they were just beginning to make their family, right? The husband, the wife, and she was pregnant with their first child. Along comes a gypsy. And of course, the story changes. Sometimes it's a gypsy in a truck. Other times it's an African-American. Other times insert outsider. The person goes to the front door and essentially says, you know, do you have any work for me? Mr. Lot says, yep, I do. And he puts him to work for the week. And he does all of these restorations around the farm, and he mends fences, and he does all this stuff. And at the end of the week, he asks for his money, and Mr. Lot says, absolutely not. To which the gypsy starts to yell at him, like, you can't do this to me. Mr. Lot takes out his shotgun, points it at him, and says, I can do whatever I want. Get off of my property. Who are you going to go tell? Go tell the people in the town, and go tell the sheriff and see what happens. And so the gypsy, knowing that he's wasted his week, knowing that he's not going to get any justice, turns around and says to him, you know, you have soiled your good name, and now I'm going to soil your name for eternity. You will never have a child that will live past a year. The child that's in your wife right now will wither and die, and you will never have another one that lives to be an adult. And gets back in his truck and drives away. And sure as he says it, a few months later, the first Lot child is born. They essentially forget about it, and before her first birthday, she dies. They get pregnant about a year later. They have a child, and before that child's first birthday, it dies. They have a third child, and that child lives past a year, and they think the curse has been broken, and they rejoice only to have that child die at 18 months. So the curse has played itself out. The Lots feel that the only way they can get over it is to get into their, pack up everything, leave the farm the way it is, go move someplace else, and try to start a new life. And they disappear from history. It's interesting because I was actually able to find the tax rolls leading up to the years where these children are born. And the Lots pay their taxes. They're listed on the registry. They're listed in the census, and then all of a sudden they just disappear, and the children are left behind. And they stay in that cemetery, and for one reason or another, they're trapped. I'm not sure if it's because of the curse. I'm not sure if it's because they have no one to connect to them to help send them over. Now, the Cokers were known for allowing people who were connected to them business-wise, especially if those people didn't have a lot of money, to be buried with them. Whatever might be in this cemetery, whatever might be in the outskirts of this that people have never found, the Lot children remain. They're unexplained, and they don't go away. They continue to play within these fences, to even open the fences and go out into the orange fields. It's interesting because you have to think, and the first thing that always came to my mind was, well, how can they be walking around if they're only 1 year old? If they didn't even get to be 1 year old, it doesn't make sense. But people are experiencing this, and the Lots are the best candidate for the job. And when we went there, two things that we found were there were a lot of children buried in that cemetery. And almost all of the children who were buried in there didn't have the same name as Coker. Makes you wonder what exactly was going on. But people attributed to the Cokers. When we went there, this was my co-host at the time, Deanna. She is actually a school teacher who teaches 2, 3, 4-year-olds. And we found a book on the way there. And Tripping on Legends, we always say #follow the signs. She, for one reason or another, was compelled to buy this book. And it was about the rise of the Guardian. It was about these children having to touch the moon and find peace. And so we went there, and she read the story to them. Now, the interesting thing is, the entire time she's reading, I'm taking pictures, I'm shooting video. If you can look at this area right here, she was pretty much right in front of, these graves are right in front of the Lots, or right next to the Lots. When we went there, I can only explain it as a gathering of shadows. She's reading, and I kept seeing these little scurries, very quick. I try to catch them on camera and on video. It doesn't translate well, but you could see there were like these little shadows, these little scurries, these little wind blows that seemed to be coming towards her, almost as if not only the Lots, but the other children in the cemetery were finding their way to her. They also wanted to read the book and experience what she was doing. And it's one of those interesting moments where, as we were experiencing this, all of a sudden there was dead quiet. Now, you can see there are trees all around this. We're in an orchard, so you usually have a whole bunch of different animals making sounds. For almost the entire duration of her time reading the story, as the sun is setting, nothing, no noise whatsoever. It's almost as if we were trapped in a bubble for that moment. And then we get to Arbuckle Creek, which is a very, very different story. I had heard about Arbuckle Creek through a series of emails and random posts that didn't make sense to me. Or at least the haunting, I was like, these details don't quite make sense. And I ended up going down an incredible rabbit hole with this one. Arbuckle Creek, and this is the Arbuckle Creek Bridge that you see me over here, is in a town in Florida which has to have one of the greatest names in a state that has cities and towns with great names. The name is Lorida, Florida. Yes, The name of the town is literally Florida without the F. Lorida, Florida. And it is a ghost town. It is essentially taken off the map. I'm going to go right here to this one. I'm going to tell you a little bit of the history of the town and then go back to it. So Arbuckle Bridge is in the town of Florida, and it was a town that was doomed to fail. It is on the banks of a lake known as Lake Iscopaca. Okay, Lake Iscopaca. If you translate that into Seminole, it means lake where people die. Yes, if you are going to build a town, rule number one, don't build it on the lake where people die. The Seminoles, when they were coming down during their initial entrance into Central Florida, this is a little bit more south, into South Florida, between Orlando and Okeechobee, right? Avon Park, places like that, Sebring, places like that. You'll find what used to be Florida. They're building the town on this lake. The Seminoles were coming down, and there's an unusual riptide in that lake, and it literally was sucking people under. And so they would be rowing across it, and they would look back, and the person who was there was no longer there. And so, when they got to the other side, those who survived, they assumed that they had done something wrong, that there was some kind of curse on this, and they wanted to give a warning to people. And so they called it the lake where people die. And the citizens, they didn't really heed that, because 100 years later or 50 years later, they start developing a town around it. And they go through several different names before the postmaster essentially says, yeah, you know what? I like Florida. And everyone was just like, okay, whatever, we agree. So not only is it the worst name in Florida history, it's the worst naming story in Florida history. This town had a slight boom, right? Once people started getting there, the trains came, which is another big theme in a lot of these types of towns, and it had its boom. But then things started to go wrong. Crops weren't growing the way they were supposed to grow, and the biggest hit happened during World War II. Most of the population was male, and they went off to fight the war. And so many of them either died or, learned what it was like to live someplace else other than Florida, and they never came back. And so, of course, as more people leave, the economy goes down, which means things gets worse and the economy goes down even more. And so the town began to fail. Around the time the town began to fail, people started to develop another story. And this was used to explain why things were going wrong. It's said that on Arbuckle Bridge, a man made a deal with a witch for a love potion. And it's interesting because she's never called a witch in any of the stories, but her description completely matches one. She's said to be old. She's said to be famous within the town for making these potions and having things, and cures for people. He meets her on the bridge. She's about to hand him the love potion, and she says, "No, my price has changed. Now, I want your firstborn child." If that sounds a lot like Rumpelstiltskin, you're getting it. The man is absolutely insane over this. Absolutely no way he's going to give his firstborn child. They get into a fight. He throws her off the bridge, and she becomes impaled on a tree in the swampy creek and dies. The man, realizing what he's done, knows he's got to do something. He jumps into the water. He weighs her body down, and he's like, "I am out of here," taking the love potion with him. Well, her body floats to the surface. Now, if you ask the locals, this completely coincides with the town starting to fail. So everyone assumes it's the witch. Not only that, but people driving on this bridge keep seeing a ghostly figure of an old woman pointing at them. They'll drive by, and she'll walk out in the middle of the road, and what seems to hit her, they'll get out of the car, and she won't be there, but they'll hear her laughing. People say that if you drive on the bridge, she'll appear in your back seat. All these classic roadside legends. And so they figure, well, we've got to dig up the witch and get rid of her. They dig her up. They perform these rituals that they think is going to cleanse her, and they go bury her in another town. Things continue to happen. And so they go to where her house used to be, and they burn her house down, and things continue to happen. And the town fails, and eventually everything goes away except for the legend. And it's said that to this day, if you go to Arbuckle Bridge, you're going to see that old woman. But there's another part of the story as well. This was kind of going down the rabbit hole. I discovered people were leaving comments on this legend. And one of the most common comments that people were leaving was that they also saw a father and a son at the bridge. Most times they would see them underneath the bridge. People would have their fishing lines played with, or they would see like a little boy, and the little boy would be looking up at them, and then when they'd go to talk to him, he'd run away and he'd disappear, or he'd jump into the water and he wouldn't be there anymore, but there would be no splash. And people, it's interesting, we're just throwing this out, and I'm like, oh, the curse has been extended, because not only is the bridge the eternal home of the woman and the witch, but also of the man and his firstborn child, right? What else could explain a father and a son, or a male and a child left at that bridge, their ghosts still there, except to say that maybe there's actually their spirits there as well. I went to this bridge. This was one of my favorite legend trips of all time, because it had a really great entry into it. We did one episode where all we talked about were absolutely crazy formulas for love potions. If you ever have some time, go and type in old love potions, and you will be entertained and disgusted at what they thought could actually make people fall in love with you back in the day. I decided to make a love potion myself for this. This is, you can kind of see the fruit of all my hard labor. I went all out for this one. I consulted with several of my friends who are experts in witchcraft. They gave me an excellent recipe for a love potion. The story is connected to another legend, a really old Grimm's fairy tale, which has to do with a woman who loses her arms. Her arms are chopped off because of a curse, and it had to do with apples. So I'm like, we're gonna put apples in it, and I made this whole thing. And the ultimate point of this was that you were supposed to stir this love potion for 5 hours chanting. There was no way that I have time in my life to sit around and stir a pot of, I'm not going to tell you what's in the love potion, for 5 hours. No way I was going to do it. So instead, I did the next best thing. I put it on, boiled it, got it to a nice, boil, lowered the temperature. So now it's simmering. And I went, Alexa, play love songs from metal bands in the 80s. And so pretty much for 5 hours, my house... Alexa, stop. Made it actually go off. So for 5 hours, my house was filled with Bon Jovi. It was filled with all of these great metal ballads from the 80s. Maybe that's why the formula didn't work. I'm not quite sure. But we did go there. And it was really interesting, because when you get out there, it is in the middle of nowhere. There are these big farms, but they're down the road and they're desolate. And this little area, you go from being in a somewhat populated area to being completely isolated very quickly. And the interesting thing is, when we were, we actually, because we wanted to engage the witch, and so we did a protection spell, and we brought some things that we thought might help to spark a witch. You can see the kind of protection circle we cast here with the candles. Whenever we were trying to engage the witch, you could hear the dogs from the nearby farms going crazy. And when we weren't, nothing, except for like the chirps and stuff like that. Then as soon as we would start doing the protection spell, the dogs went absolutely crazy. They were nowhere near close enough for us to actually see them, or for them to see what we were doing. The funny thing is, we drank, both of my co-host and I drank this love potion. A little bit too salty, so we didn't drink too much of it. And then we kind of splashed it into the water. And then we went to the top of the bridge. That's the first picture you see here is of me dumping some of the love potion into the creek itself from the top of the bridge. Once again, what is evidence? What is experience? As we were on the top of that bridge, after I had drank the love potion, after I had dumped the remaining parts of the love potion into the water, I saw, imagine the light you see when a flash goes off, when someone flashes and you've got that second and there's like a remaining thing in your eyes. And it was of a man and a small child walking across the bridge, 3 steps, boom, boom, boom. And I was like, wait a minute, what just happened there? And I looked back again and I kind of like, adjusted my eyes and there was no light like in my eyes or anything. Once again, 3 steps, a man and a little child, boom, boom, boom. And that happened to me 3 times. And then we tried to recreate it. We're literally on this bridge in the middle of the night, flashing flashlights into my eyes, trying to get like some kind of reaction from it that we could say was what had actually happened. And it just wasn't going on. It just wasn't happening. So I really feel that we were able to connect with them. And when that happens, and when it becomes real for you like that, you have to start to wonder, are these real experiences and we're making up the curse, or is that curse part of that area and you touch it? I'm going to give you a little bit of a spoilers. My girlfriend and I broke up a week after that. So I'm not quite sure if the curse kind of followed me home. My last story tonight is the story of the Hog Island Witch. And this is an extreme case of not only the outsider, but an extreme case of follow the signs, hashtag follow the signs. I had heard the story of the Hog Island Witch, and I've heard different versions of it. One of them is this very folksy kind of, she's given a name, and it said that she was friend to everybody who was in that area, who was in Hog Island. Hog Island, think the area of Brooksville and Bushnell. And the town started to fail, and everyone in the town assumed it was because she had, they were embracing her. They were going to her for remedies, and God was punishing them. And so they told her to leave, and she refused to leave. And they stopped going to her place, and people were still going there. They were disobeying the community, and they decided they needed to get rid of this witch. And so they said they had a trial, and then they dragged her out to the swamp, and they hung her. And if you can see this picture in the background, this is what I eventually come across when we get there. And it's almost a perfect circle. It looks very much like what we would think of as a witch's circle, or even a fairy circle. And all these trees have what I would call they're fairy trees. They have these hollowed out entrances that are said to be vortexes to other places. Whenever you can't see a fairy, whenever the fairies disappear, it said they go into these trees and they appear somewhere else. I was completely drawn into this story, right? I thought that it was one of the coolest stories I'd ever heard, mainly because she was still active, right? There's a campground. There's a Hog Island campground and Withlacoochee campground that's right there. And this witch is said to torture the people that stay there. She rips open tents. She bangs on campers. It said you can hear her screaming in the middle of the night. There is a legend in the legend that actually says this witch was the inspiration for the Blair Witch. And it makes a little bit of sense because the people who wrote that story and who created it went to UCF. And it's not very far from UCF, but I've never been able to find any reference whatsoever that says they got this story from what was happening on Hog Island. Just kind of adds to the mystique of it. It said you could see her walking on the trails, that you can hear her heckling in the woods, at night especially. You could see her glowing red eyes. And I wanted to see what all the stir was about. And so we got there to this place, and we were actually at this sign right here, and we were drawn into a section of the woods, right? And the section of the woods that we were drawn to looked like there had been a control burning, and it had burned with such intense heat that the tops of the trees were black, but the bottoms weren't. So like a burning had happened, and it created so much heat that it rose, and not only that, they were stretched together. The branches were stretched together, what looked like two hands that were forming an archway. And we said, that's where we need to go. That's where we need to go. And we started on the path. We started walking there. There was no path. We started walking there, and the ranger pulled up. And the ranger asked us what we were doing. And we're always honest. We said, we're folklorists. Have you ever heard the story of the witch? And he's like, I've never heard that story before. That kind of stuff doesn't happen here. And we ended up talking to him for about a half hour. And as the half hour goes by, we discovered that in this area, this Hog Island, which is very close to a major project I'm working on in a place called Pemberton Ferry, people don't talk about the paranormal, right? It's right across the river from Brooksville, an area known as Croom, where people are more than happy to tell you any ghost story that you want to hear. They tell it as if it's part of their natural history. They take pride in it. They point out places that are said to be haunted. There's ghost tours through it. And then on the other side of the river, no one talks about it, even though it's still happening over there. And so over the course of this conversation, the ranger kind of began to open up. And he said, no, I don't believe in any of that stuff. There's no witch here. But my grandmother used to come out here, and she considered herself a white witch, and she said she was fighting the forces of evil in this area. Well, that sounds like some witches to me. No, they're just old stories, The other thing that he told us was, you're wrong, you're going the wrong way anyway. You got to go around the path this way, and that way you can explore everything. And so we're like, oh, okay, we left what we were doing, what we felt compelled to do, and we started walking on the path until this happened. As we were walking, we saw off of the trail this. The entire forest is still, except for that one branch. It's almost as if someone is pulling it back and forth. So we decided #follow the signs, right? Go to that branch, and what we discovered off the path was this tree. Now, if you can see this right here, it's a noose. And this noose has been there for so long, it's almost into the wood, right? It's overgrown with moss. This is not something that happened yesterday. This is not even necessarily something that happened a year ago, although, Florida weather is pretty harsh. This, and you can kind of see it tied up here, this was there for a very long time. And because of our conversations with some people, because of our research I did after the fact, this is not a witch. This is not a witch's story. This is a story of a lynching. And I was actually able to find a newspaper article that talks about, in this area, a person had committed a crime. They dragged him into the swamp and they hung him. Now, the odd thing is that there are other reports in this area, especially in Brooksville, and this is right next to Brooksville, where it's very clear where hanging trees are. We went to a place called Spring Hill, for example, and it's known as a hanging, where there's said to be a hanging tree in the middle of an African-American cemetery. When we were talking to the ranger, he said, yep, there's a hanging tree down here on this road and this road. One of the famous hanging trees is on this road and this road. And so there's definitely this history in that area of racial tension. Here's the interesting thing. This branch and the path to get to it, we essentially made a map to it. A friend of mine, the writer Mark Muncy, who's written Creepy Florida, Spooky Florida, he writes ghost books and weird tales of Florida too. He went to this site a week later. We drew him a map. He couldn't find that rope. He couldn't find that noose. I went back maybe a month later to the exact same location. It wasn't there. I went back there a year later and I decided to conduct a more extensive search. That rope is no longer there. It's as if we were just meant to see it that one day so that we would know that the curse that people say exists is something very, very different. And that's my presentation for tonight. I hope that these stories, some of these stories, are actually featured in my new book, Haunted Florida Love Stories, because there's a connection between those. Definitely the one that takes place in Florida, Arbuckle Creek is there. And some other stories which have both, that are connected to all the different presentations I've done, right? What's better than one excuse for a haunting than 2 or 3 different excuses for a haunting? And right now, I would love to, if anyone would like to, if anyone has any kind of questions. I've got my information here. I'll keep it up for a moment. My Facebook, like I said, is www.facebook.com/trippingonlegends. My website is actually trippingonlegends.com. Again, I forgot to change that. My Twitter is at SpookyBalzano, and my Instagram is at SpookyTripping. Does anybody have any questions?
Right on. Thanks, Christopher. That was awesome. We've had a few questions coming up, and actually one from both Facebook. We had one person ask about it on Facebook and one person ask about it on YouTube. So I don't know if you've heard much about it, but Casadega, Florida. Have you been there? Have you researched anything? Someone asked you about Bamboo Sanctuary. I was doing some research. Haunted Hotel.
Casadega is one of those bucket list places, and we were all set to go there. We were actually going to try to spend a night at one of the hotels, or at least we were going to try to go in Orlando and then make Casadega the next night. I remember our very first presentation when we did the murders, and we talked about the Devil's Tree.
Mm-hmm.
I had stupidly taken a piece of bark.
Oh, yeah.
Well, we were on our way to Casadega with that bark in our hands when the car began to break down. And then we couldn't find a single hotel. We were in Orlando, the hotel capital of the world. We could not find a single place to stay. And the only way we were able to get the car back running, and it was about 1 o'clock at night by that time, was us throwing the piece of bark away. And then all of a sudden the car miraculously started running perfectly. So we never made it to Casadega. The great story that I love in Casadega is of the Devil's Chair. That's where we're going to do the Devil's Tree and then the Devil's Chair. And they say that if you sit on the Devil's Chair, you get pushed out of it. And so people go there and they try. I guess there's some part of the legend where you're supposed to try to drink a beer and you can't finish the beer without the beer can being knocked away out of your hand or you being pushed out of the chair. So that's definitely some place that I want to go. And you know, a lot of people I know go there and they can spend days because it is a community filled with psychics and filled with people who work with energy. And so in addition to all these little haunted locations, people go there for what they say is the best reading of their life.
Man, that's that's pretty close. Deltona is not too far from here. That I saw that was near Deltona. So but yeah, that's awesome.
Now I'm kind of scared to go there because now it has this mystique because it was like the place we didn't get to go to because of the tree. So,
but yeah, if it was a bad spirit like it was from the Devil's Tree, maybe it was you'll find some better ones over there.
and that's the idea with curses, right? They can be curses or good luck, right? Depending on how you look at it. And so, you know, I'm waiting for the good stuff to happen so I can call it not a curse. But what are you going to do?
Right on. We've got one asking about the Pemberton Ferry.
Yeah.
You heard of this? Yeah.
Wait, is there someone that's here who knows of the town of Pemberton Ferry?
Yeah, Pam had been message us about it and asked if you were looking into it at all.
Yes, Pam. I don't know who you are. One of about 5 people in the universe, and I'm one of them, who remembers the town of Pemberton Ferry. The name of the project is This Town is Myth, because it's not only is it a ghost town, and it's not even a ghost town, it's been completely destroyed. It's been wiped out of the history books. So whereas other places, at least you can look and do research, Pemberton Ferry is all but lost. I'm not going to bring you into my bedroom right now, but if you were there, you would see my walls are covered with maps of the area of Pemberton Ferry and nearby Croom, with timelines of it, because I'm obsessed with this idea that this is a place that should be one of the most haunted locations in Florida. It has the most deadliest spot, and I'm going to pronounce it wrong, but the Withlacoochee River, and what's known as Iron Bridge. If Pamela knows Pemberton Ferry, I'm sure she knows Iron Bridge. Everyone I've ever spoken to from that area knows someone who died there. In addition to that, it just has a history even before like modern people of taking lives. There's a ghost train that's said to run through it. It should be the most haunted location because so much horrible stuff has happened there. There are no ghost stories other than that ghost train, right?
Oh.
Someone who says if you go to Iron Bridge, and knock 3 times on the grating, and if you sit there on the banks at Iron Bridge and you look out, it's the most peaceful, beautiful area in the world. And if you go to that water, you're going to die. And so I'm drawn into this whole history of Pemberton Ferry. So Pamela, please message me. You can contact me on Facebook. My email is spookytripping.com. I was actually how I got involved in it was I told that Hog Island story. We did a whole episode on it, and a woman called to tell me, "You're an idiot. You got everything wrong. You don't even know where you're located at." And I was like, "Well, that's kind of part of the story. Is no one knows, no one owns this area. Like, what town is it? No one can tell us. We thought it was this area." A guy told us, "I have never heard of the word Croom." Literally, he's wearing a shirt that says Croom National Park or State Park. He's like, "I don't know what Croom is." Very, very tight-lipped. But she was trying to save Wild Cow Prairie Cemetery. If you can see that without the sparks. This is a picture that she made. I'm trying to get it so it's not. This is a picture that she made of her grandmother telling her about the ghost lights in Wild Cow. And they were going to build a gas station, I believe it was. And between her and I, we were actually able to save this cemetery, which is crucial to the history of that area. And we've discovered more and more bodies there, and it's this big thing that's kind of going on there. And there's a lot of conspiracy and political things I won't talk about right now that have to do with that are mixed into this whole Pemberton Ferry thing. So it's really been this obsession with me that I'm like, I have to finish my next book. In the next 2 weeks, it's got to be to the publisher, and then I'm devoting myself entirely to This Town is Myth. So if you have anything specific to ask, I would love it, but please definitely get in touch with me if you know anything about Pemberton Ferry.
Cool. Yeah, definitely. Go on the facebook.com/tripping on legends, and yeah, get in contact with Christopher if you're interested. So got time for another maybe question and a half here.
Okay.
Someone's asking about you investigating a specific home, but you're not really you're not really an investigator, right? You just seek out stories.
So in the 4 years that I've been back in this, I've been asked for 2 different people to investigate their homes, and they were people who I personally knew, and so I went into their homes to investigate. Both were crazy experiences, but it's not what I do anymore. I only specifically did it because they were in a tough situation. They were friends of mine, and I'm like, I still know how to investigate. I still, have that investigative knowledge, and so I went in there. But I don't do personal homes or anything like that anymore.
Okay.
But if you need help with something, I can help you. So if it's someone who needs help and they're like, I'm experiencing something, what should I do? Please get in contact with me, and I can at least maybe help you out with some home remedies, or at least get you in touch with someone who might be able to investigate for you.
Awesome. And like kind of jumping off from that, I know you're really focused on researching the stories and really concerned with the stories behind it. What's that like for someone who was asking? How do you investigate these stories? How do you find out about them initially, and then what do you do from there?
What I do, I'm going to plug you. The first thing that I do is I hit the internet, right? Because the internet is the voice of the people. And whereas the internet can be the worst research tool you could possibly have, what I do is I want to know how people are telling the story in real time, right? Like, what are they currently saying about it? And I don't stop at the story, I go into the comments. And usually in the comments of a story like this, you're going to find someone makes reference to this. And now that's the rabbit hole I go down and I'm researching. Then I hit up the library, right? And I find whatever information I can. And that's where usually, depending on the library, you can get tax records, you can get archive newspaper articles. And you're just trying to connect the dots as much as you possibly can. What I'm going to talk about, if we do the Native American one, is the Singing Manatee River. And there's one reference made to this newspaper article in 1945 by a certain writer. And I literally was in the Bradenton Library for an entire weekend, the entire time that it was open, searching through these microfiche, trying to find this article that was referenced in something. Then the other part of this is I publish it, right? I talk about it. And when you talk about it, then all of a sudden someone says, oh, I know Pemberton Ferry. And that's the next thread you can follow. And that's the next thing you follow up on. So you can go out, and then of course going out in the field. A lot of times you go out in the field and you start to talk to people. Hey, what's going on with this? Or have you ever heard of this? And they'll give you not only some information, they'll give you the next legend. Or like we explored last week, we went to Silver Springs. We had 2 different things planned that day. The employees talked so much that we ended up staying there for like 8 hours just talking to the employees about things that they experienced. So it's partly in a library, it's partly in front of a computer, and it's partly getting out there and talking to people and seeing the location for yourself.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. I love the idea of just like almost like a treasure hunt for stories. Like it's a really cool, like just diving into that. Like I know that was always my favorite part in college on writing papers, is just that dive into the research.
And that's when you saw my daughter earlier. That's the part that I engage my kids in as well, because it's like, here's how you research history, and here's where you live, and now let's go out and do some spooky stuff with it too.
Awesome! It's just so cool to have just like just like even that firsthand investigation, like talking to people, really neat. So that's some great tips for really any subject you want to research. Great answer. And then just for the last thing, we're gonna kind of talk about. Someone was asking if you have a live stream or a web series, and I know you have both. So you wanna plug those?
Yeah, I do. My show is called Tripping on Legends, and it goes live now every Tuesday at 9:00 on midnight.fm. But I also broadcast it on Facebook Live. So I do the Facebook Live, and I share it to Tripping on Legends. So facebook.com/Tripping on Legends. But then I also do it on my Instagram. So I literally have like 4 different screens up that I'm talking to in the Instagram, Spooky Tripping. And so what I always say is, if you've enjoyed this show, you might enjoy the live shows that we do and then the new episodes. But if you want to really get like the juice of a lot of these stories, the early episodes are me with my co-host, who's no longer part of the show, discussing these and discussing what we're going to do. So I always say, wherever you get podcasts, go in there, type on Tripping on Legends. Our early episodes are amazing. They're still good now, but our episodes where it's the 2 of us and there's a lot more banter back and forth and jokes and stuff are really interesting. And I call it Tripping on Legends because it's a learning process. I sometimes trip on the way to find this. And I love when someone tells me I'm wrong. And those early episodes especially, you start to see how to become a good legend tripper yourself, like what to do well, mistakes we made along the way. So it's a really good show, and I'm really proud of it. So
awesome. Yeah, I know I've listened to a few episodes, and I think it's a really cool show. Really, like if you liked any of these stories, like it's gonna go way deeper on those episodes. So if you like any of these stories, you can probably find an episode on it, or just find a new one. There's some really great stuff on there. So quite a few episodes banked as well. So you've got a lot of
over 100 episodes. Yep.
Right on. Yeah, thank you so much, Christopher.
Like
I said, this is the last one we're doing in this three-week series. However, check back on our channels. I believe we'll be having one coming up towards the end of October. I believe it's the 28th at the moment, but things could always change or anything like that. So just keep up to date. We'll make sure to throw the information in there. Yeah, check out with us in October. Check on the Tripping on Legends Facebook page, Spooky Tripping Instagram, and get in contact with Christopher if you know anything about the Pemberton Ferry. Awesome.
You can lie about it at this point, and I would say.
Hey, any lead's a good lead. So thank you so much for hanging out with us the past 3 weeks, Christopher. It's been really great.
Thank you very much for having me.
Loved everything about it. So yeah, we'll be talking soon. And thanks everyone.
I don't even know what I'm going to do with myself next Thursday. Part of my week now. So.
Oh man. Well, yeah, I'll be checking out the live streams. Keep it going. So yeah, I'm stoked. Yeah, thanks a lot, Christopher, and thanks everyone.
Thank you very much. Have a wonderful good night.
All right, have a good one, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe to our YouTube channel to be the first to find out when we have new fun and informative videos for you. Orange County Library System is your place to learn, grow, connect.